according to today's statistics, only 43% of Americans choose to be buried. Let me tell you what you should be thinking about your future now. I think cemeteries are the coolest history books we will ever have on the human race. I think that humans made the coolest options in the past when all they could do was be buried. That's what they chose to do. So in the past, what they would do is they would take wood and tree wood, put it in the ground to hold a spot for the person that had passed that they buried, and paint it white and then write their name on it. And that's how gravestones were started. It was just pieces of wood. And then if you go to a cemetery, I think the oldest we have here is the Morris Hill Cemetery. It's the oldest cemetery we have in Idaho, in Boise, in the Treasure Valley. And they have, I think they do have a wood gravestone there from the oldest person. The one I did find was from 1850, and it was still made of like marble, and it was still made of pretty good quality. So having that old wood back in our own Morris Hill Cemetery is just crazy. I can't believe that we have that kind of stuff here. But I wanted to talk about the Morris Hill Cemetery, but I also want to talk about the Miles Standish Burial, which is the oldest cemetery in the U.S. So it was founded in 1620, and there were so many, it was so old that the only people there were pilgrims from the Mayflower. And there was only about 130 burials there. So it's pretty insane that all of them were that old. And then I want to talk about how both cemeteries do hold soldiers and veterans. Although it's pretty old, they still hold war veterans. And they also hold unknown soldiers. Unknown soldiers because they want to give those people, even though they weren't founded and they couldn't find all their information, they still wanted those people to properly be buried and be appreciated for the work that they did. So they gave them a gravestone, and it's just beautiful the way that the cemetery set them up. It's just long rows and they all match, and it's just beautiful to think of it like that. So the reason that I chose this topic is because I took a Dead of the Undead class at the beginning of the year. I decided that, oh, this class was pretty cool because it's a quid class, and that's the one they have to take to learn about CWI and learn about all the stuff that we have and give a tour of the website. And I thought that it was not going to be super interesting. I was like, oh, it's just going to be about school, but then they're just going to involve some zombies in there. But it was actually very, very interesting because it was taught by Abby Wolford, and she ends up teaching all of us that every week something new. Like the first week we talked about vampires, and then we talked about zombies, and then we talked about mummies, and it was just so interesting. And one of those weeks we talked about cemeteries, and so I decided to choose cemeteries because they were just so interesting to me. I couldn't get over how cool they were. And so because of that, I just thought it was the best option to do because there were so many different things I wanted to talk about. I couldn't involve everything in this video. It would just take way too long. But it was just such a cool topic, and I couldn't get over it. So I had to show everybody, and this is the best way to show them. So the pictures I have are, this is the Rose Hill Cemetery. This is actually the biggest cemetery we have in the U.S. And they have they're mostly known for their soldiers and their war veterans in their cemetery. And I didn't choose to do that one because it was just so strict and they only did those. So all the tombstones look very similar. But the reason I chose the Miles Standish Burial is because it's just so many different tombstones. They have all kinds of symbols and meanings to each tombstone. There was one from 1830, and he had a picture of himself on his gravestone with his wife next to him in the different gravestone. And they were just so beautiful. I didn't know what people looked like in the 1800s, and they were pretty amazing. I was just so interested. I had to take pictures of it and show everybody how cool it was. So if you go to the Morris Hill Center, the Morris Hill Cemetery, you will actually find that cemetery, and it's pretty awesome. We also have, at our Morris Hill Cemetery, we have Paul Revere, which is a rock star, and he was, famous for rock and roll, and he actually has very good music. I'd listened to his song Kicks and his song, like, Stand Out, one of his songs called Stand Out, and they were so cool. I love that. I love those songs. And he was buried here in Garden City, in Boise. And he actually, I think it was Garden Valley that he ended up passing away. And they actually have a spot for him, and they have a spot for his wife next to his gravestone, next to his grave. And I just think that's such a beautiful thing, to have couples be buried together. It is a little scary to have, like, your grave and then be like, oh yeah, I have a grave waiting for you. Like, that's kind of creepy to be buried next to your husband, but they have that spot already saved for you. Pretty scary, but it was still really cool, and I think that all cemeteries have that feature, but it was just, I never knew that. Like, I didn't know anything about cemeteries. So I think that one walk, go through one, like, an hour or two, walking around in a cemetery, looking at all the graves, and it's just so beautiful. There's so many things you find out, more than what I'm telling you. It's just incredible. I love them. And I just have the oldest cemetery, a picture of the oldest cemetery there, and then I have the Morris Hill Cemetery, like one of the gravestones in that cemetery today. I have my sources here. These are just 2 sources on both of the cemeteries here, the facts that I learned.